NSFW, what is your most FK'd up first date experience? The guy was super baked and kept complimenting me on the cute wrinkles on my toes. His brain was probably going FCK, you thought you could do this. I went on a date with this guy. After dinner we went back to his apartment to hang out. I went to the bathroom and when I came back out he was masturbating on the couch. I made a beeline for the front door and never spoke to him again. He didn't say anything either. Only works 2/3 of the time. For a while I had on my Cupid profile that I would accept any reasonably pitched invitation to a date. This led to many bad dates. A notably bad one. Guy invites me to a party. I ask a few questions but he's kinda vague. Tells me to dress nice. It ends up being a religious family holiday. He told his family I was his girlfriend. I went with it. You're a champ for playing along. Dateline 1983 San Francisco. I met a girl in small bookstore. We seemed to hit it off so I asked her out. She took me to a nearby ATM to get some cash for dinner and she and her partner tries to rob me. They had been having some success with the setup over the summer. So the SFPD was watching ATMs in the area and arrested them both. I spent the night at the police station being interviewed and writing my statement. No dinner. No first date sex. And the shop sold the book I wanted. The girl didn't know it was a date. Oh man. Freshman in high school. First date ever. We went to a movie. My first warning sign was that he smelled like BO when he put his arm around me. He was just awkward and strange in general but we didn't interact much because of the movie. His dad picked us up from the theater. The dude knew that the child window locks in the car were engaged. And purposefully farted to test me? Dot. I remember violently gagging. His dad unlocking the locks. The first recorded instance of a teenager embarrassing a dad. Lol. Went out with this guy who seemed totally normal at first. We went to dinner and then he suggested going to play pool. Okay. Sure. So he's driving us to this dive bar he likes that has pool tables and casually mentions you are so cute. I could just kidnap you and keep you forever. I was young and stupid and thought. He's totally joking. We played pool at this crappy place and then he goes to drive me home and mentions again how much he'd like to kidnap me. Going into details on how he'd do it. Luckily he took me home and I didn't talk to him ever again so no kidnapping occurred. Oh, he also mentioned a few times how he loved my Jewish name and how his parents would love it if he finally brought home a Jew. I was not Jewish. I told him that more than once. It was a really terrible date. A girl who I was friends with on Facebook messaged me out of the blue saying she saw me in public at a shopping mall. So we start talking and decide to meet up at a bar for drinks. When I showed up she was already sitting at a booth with two men. We acknowledge each other from a distance and she texts me saying save me. A couple minutes goes by and she finally gets up and walks over to me as I'm standing at the bar. We were having some decent conversation when about 30 minutes later another guy shows up and she introduces him by his name. He just sort of hung around and bought us drinks for the next hour as I stood there talking to my date. Turns out it was her boyfriend that was hanging out with us. She felt the need to tell me afterwards out of guilt. Met a guy online and thought he was cool. So met up with him for a coffee. I kissed him on the cheek to say hello, which he took as an opportunity to stick his tongue down my throat and go for a boob grab. I pulled back. And he yelled at me as IT because I'm AFCK ein retarded in front of a packed cafe. He had a hearing aid. I left pretty quickly after that. You like that you f***ing retarded? Met this guy on Yahoo chat. We chatted twice for a total of 45 minutes. He asks me out. We met at the mall. We ate at Garfield's. We walked around the mall. He kept asking me to go into stores and then he would try to kiss me. But he would try to make it real theatrical by grabbing the back of my head, looking in my eyes and saying damn it I'm sorry, but I love you. After the second store I quit going into stores with him. He tried it about 6 more times. We went to see MR and MRS Smith. He kept trying to hold my hand. He leaned over a couple times and whispered "I love you" in my ear. He yelled comments at the movie a lot. After the movie he asked me to go back to his place and watch the movie Spaceballs, drink wine and see how lucky I could get. Then he winked. I said no thank you. Never talked to him again. I went on a date with a guy who seemed pretty confident and stable during the entire time together. We went to the movies and then he dropped me home. He ended the date by kissing me and telling me he loved me. Classic schmosby. Confident and stable. Cool. Dropped me home. Well, that's polite. Kissed me. If it was going well, then why not? Told me he loved me. FCK. I once passed a kidney stone the morning before a first date I had scheduled. I showed up to the date half stoned on Vicodin the doctor prescribed me for the pain. It must have been a pretty fun date, since she eventually married me. I was kinda talking to a girl for a while and she invited me out for a weekend with all of her friends. We drove about 80 miles away from our area and I didn't know a single person there. When we got to the hotel she just left me in a room full of people I didn't know. I walk out of the room and see her f-king one of the guys from her group of friends out in the parking lot. In the back of a car. I had to call my mom and ask for money just so I can get my own room. She then asked if her and some of the other people could crash in my room so they all didn't have to share just one. Edit. I didn't leave because I didn't drive there. And yes, I told her to FCK off. Oh. Once. I went on a date with a guy that went really well. Until he took me to his apartment afterward. He had a dog that had literally shitty all over his bathroom and he didn't clean it up. I had to step over all the shitty to get to the toilet and it was all disgusting. Then his dog ate my necklace and chewed up my shoe. 2 months later. He impregnated a girl with the same name as me. It isn't a common spelling. That's what happens when you wear a macaroni necklace. Was invited over to a woman's house after a heavy night of drinking. We started tearing each other's clothes off the moment we walked in. Proceeded to the bedroom and went to town on each other. She was quite the screamer. Come morning. I wake to her then 4-year-old daughter entering the room asking, "Is daddy home?" As it turns out, this woman was separated from her husband prior to filing for a divorce. Screamed like mad during sex with her daughter in the next room. And was living at her in-laws' house. The second this woman rushed her daughter out of the room, I got dressed, crawled out of the first floor window in the bedroom, and ran like hell to my car without looking back. Never look back. On the plus side, I managed to add and immediately scratch off a few things on my bucket list. It was mostly alright. I'd consider myself pretty awkward. So I've always had a lot of leniency for others who might be as well. Maybe he was shy. Too? We both seem to be having a good time. Well. The bill comes, he grabs it. He pauses for a moment. And without opening the sleeve says, "I'll pay if I can shave your body." I was stunned. Briefly, that's more of a second date proposition. Right? But he takes my silence as I'm considering it. Please continue with more detail. It didn't have to be SZUL if I didn't want it. Q. And he'd gladly pay cash for the less socially acceptable places to shave. He have eyebrows as an example. But really. The goal was to shave every hair off. Head to toe. Excuse me? Oh. He has a shave fetish. Funny how that didn't come up until now. Thanks for clarifying. I paid my half and noped right out of there. Talking about neighborhoods and this girl brought up how there was too many S here. That was my second week in Portland. City is not as progressive as the locals like to pretend it is. WTF man. Just because there are too many S in Portland. Doesn't mean it's not progressive. Got racist much? Choosing a restaurant for us to go to. And being a cheapskate by ordering the least expensive thing on the menu. Then Being rude and eating off my plate, saying this is too much food for you anyway. Let me list the worst one. He kept insisting on picking me up because he said he wanted to be a proper gentleman. So I agreed after he kept begging cause he didn't want to ruin where he was taking me. Well, he got mad that I didn't want to kiss him, so he dropped me off in the middle of downtown to have someone get me. Really messed up. And he was bragging about how many dates he goes on. FCKU Aaron. She attempted suicide after I dropped her off. She survived. But I haven't dated since. Maybe you were so great she wanted to end her life on a positive note because no guy would ever be able to compare to you. Not myself. But here's a story. Me and my friend were hanging out and wanted to invite the whole gang over and hit up Korean BBQ. One of our friends, let's call him Steven, said he was busy and that he had a date set up. Of course he was super stoked and was acting like he was hot tea because of it. Then another friend, let's call him Joe, also had to bail because he had plans with a girl. Joe was talking all about how he was gonna get some PSSY tonight. And that the girl was a 10 and he was stoked. Turns out, Joe and Steven both show up to her house at the same time. Look at each other. And are really fking confused. It's been a while and they still get pissed whenever we mention their date together. It was high school. She asked me to meet her friends. I met her friends. She began making out with her ex who was with her friends. She ended it, you mean? Went to dinner with a guy. He proceeded to get really drunk and started telling me he wants me to meet his mother and take me on holidays. Just really over the top stuff. Considering I'd only met him a couple of hours ago. Not too fked up. But super awkward. I went out with a Tinder girl who was about 30 pounds heavier than her photos. Was hung up bragging about a band she was in 15 years ago. Had 3 triple vodkas and spilled the third everywhere just as she was telling me that Jackie O, in fact, was the one that shot JFK. Oh, and then after I somewhat abruptly ended our date, she texted me accidentally instead of her friend and gave her full appraisal of me. I was only 16 and it was my first date ever. He came to my house to watch movies. After watching a horror film, we got on the topic of ghosts and paranormal stuff. I told him how my great-grandmother had passed away in my home. He proceeded to talk about how he was possessed once. Then he went on to pretend that he was being possessed by my great-grandmother. Just the thought of this still makes me cringe. Badly. The most fked up, I would say, is the one time I was on a date with someone and didn't know it. I said I was cool with hanging out. And apparently she decided to take that as I want to go on a date. So, we just hang at my place. Play some video games. And that was it. I mean literally video games and chill. Not long after, I was told by someone else that she told them that we went out on a date, movie, restaurant, my place, Essex, that night. As it turns out, she's a complete psycho. Quickly squashed that friendship. And she didn't take it too well. My date picks me up so we can go out to dinner, and on the way there we passed a deer that had been struck by a car and died in someone's front lawn. He pulls his truck over, gets out a handsaw, and saws the deer's head off while 2 children look on, crying and screaming in horror. Date read a book the entire time we were on the date. Had the gall to ask me why I wasn't being so talkative. Edit. Squawk. Edit 2. I'm a guy. Date was a girl. Just to clarify. Gall. Gull is a bird. I met a guy on OkCupid. He seemed pretty cool. We had a lot of the same interests. He invited me to a barbecue during the day, which I thought would be a very nice first date. When I arrived I immediately discovered it was a baby shower. Okay, I like babies, whatever. It was his ex-girlfriend's baby shower. And you guessed it. It was his baby. I asked him what the FCK I was doing there and he admitted that he wanted to make her jealous. I left after being there for 10 minutes, but not before his ex-girlfriend asked me how much he paid me to be there. Then he texted and called me every day for a week. My first date ever in life. Took a guy out to lunch. His friend randomly shows up. Sits down. Orders food. They start texting each other, then randomly get up and leave. Sticking me with the bill. I found out later that they went to have sex. Edit. I was a sophomore in high school. I had recently received my license. This was significant because I had been talking to this girl for a while and could finally pick her up and take her out on a date. When I went to knock on her door, her two brothers, both of whom were older than me and went to my high school, all boys prep school, answered the door completely bare ass naked. They invited me in and asked me to sit and watch TV on the couch with them. The 5 minutes it took for her to get ready were the longest, most awkward 5 minutes of my life. Her brothers proceeded to ask me questions about whether or not I wanted to get naked with them. Why was I acting so weird and smiling? I went on a date with a guy, and let's just call him James. He decided that we'd go for a picnic and I was really excited. James calls me to tell me to drive to his house, and from there we'll go to this park that's about 5 minutes from his house but 15 from mine. When I get there he tells me that he packed food already but I need to drive because he didn't want to waste gas. After we set out, he gets us lost. I've never driven to this park so I didn't know the way. Eventually we make with a drive that should have been 5 minutes was 20. Still no gas money about that. We get there and we eat. But all he packed was slices of ham, some bread, and a slice of cheese. Nothing else and no drinks. After we eat he tells me to rub his back. And I thought if I give him a back rub, he'll give me one, so I did. After 20 minutes of back rubbing he turns to me and says wake me up in 20 and proceeds to fall asleep. Me. So what do you do in your spare time? Huh? I volunteer at an old folks home for people with dementia. Me. Having a grandmother with dementia. Oh wow. That's great. Thank you for. Huh? Yeah. I really like laughing at them. Dot. Welp. This is over. He brought his cousin. Took me to see Jack and Jill. Then kissed me behind a clothing rack in Urban Outfitters. I went in for a kiss and she hugged me. Messed me up. Edit. She knew. She was just letting you down nicely. A hug misunderstanding is a million times more bearable than you know. So we met through a mutual friend and he told him that he liked me. We were both going to this concert on Valentine's Day. And the plan was that we would meet there and hang out. I remember getting all dressed up and feeling really excited. So I arrived with my group of friends to the meeting spot and he's there but acting distant like he barely knows me. Turns out he had a girlfriend who insisted that she go to the concert with him. And when I arrived she was standing right there. She promptly looked me up and down with a dismissive stare and then took his hand and turned away. Needless to say I felt really bad, and the worst was that I had to endure the entire concert with my other friends before going home and crawling into bed. I f***ing hate Valentine's Day. Went on a date with a guy met via a gay dating app. Threw up a lot of red flags. Discussed his antidepressants. A previous abusive partner. Told a story about how he hit a bird with his car while driving. Had to stop to clean the gore off. Shortly after we met up he suggested we ditch my plan of a simple lunch. Take a train to his car. And go for a drive in the mountains. Told me he hated the thought of someone not liking him. Would do anything to change their mind. Begged me to not go when I tried to end the date. Also he asked for my star sign. And that was the part that really helped me make my mind up. Typical Capricorn. Met this girl on Plenty of Fish. We start chatting back and forth for a few days and eventually invites me over to her place. I get there. It's not her place. But a place she's living at the time. The house was a f***ing wreck. Reeked to hell. Saw a bunch of unfinished bowls of food and some had mold. End table next to the couch had a crack pipe on it. Noped out of the house. Told her I needed to get my phone charger. Got in the car and booked it out of there. My 1997 Corolla was like a F1 car that day trying to get out of there.